Hey guys, I'm back with another devlog. I'm sorry it's been so long, but I've been working this whole time, so there's a lot to update you guys on. I'm going to go in chronological order of the updates that I rolled out over the last year or so, and it's going to be split up into chapters, so just skip to the parts that you want to learn about. And I'm going to only talk about things once when I get to it, because sometimes I updated things and then months later reworked it. I'm just going to mention that when I get to it and talk about the state that it's in now. Also, if it sounds like I'm reading off a script, it's because I am. I have tried to boil it down to the most important parts to talk about. I have a huge script in front of me, and I don't know how I'm going to get through it all other than just doing it. So let's do it. Directly after the last devlog, I was working on the progress update for about 2 months. Then I went to MetaConnect in 2023. There I met a ton of amazing VR developers who kind of inspired me and peer pressured me into launching Nightmare Tag on AppLab, which doesn't exist anymore, RIP AppLab. We just call it early access now. As long as I have a good group of playtesters, I'm so happy to just keep developing Nightmare Tag. So shout out to everyone that has helped over the last year or so, or even since before the AppLab launch. I remember everyone and I appreciate everyone throughout the journey, even if it was just for a little bit. Shout out everyone. All your suggestions have made this game into what it is, so yeah, again, thanks everyone. The game launched on AppLab in the middle of October in 2023, which wasn't on my roadmap because I was deep into developing the progress update, but I put that aside for a few months because I knew I had to make some major polishing changes if more players were going to try this out. First thing I did was rework the server system. I did this because launching on AppLab made me a bit of money, but Unity costed about 80% of the profits, and this was kind of my fault because I was doubling up on services just because of the way I had it set up. It's kind of complicated, I won't fully explain it here, but after I fixed a few things, I got that cost down to around 30% of the profits, which still isn't that good compared to other server hosting platforms out there. But Unity has some useful features that others don't, and I needed that ability to matchmake and start and stop servers based on active player count. I think it was a good choice to stick with the Unity services just for the knowledge. I now have a good grasp of all the networking services that Unity provides and how to optimize them to be cost effective. So at this point, I decided to use Unity's Matchmaker service for the server management, which is this clean pre-built system that connects players together based on whatever configuration you want. Usually this is meant for like skill-based matchmaking, but in my case, I just wanted to start and stop servers based on player count. So in my new setup, if a player goes through the quick join server door, when all the servers are full, Unity will start up a new server and connect that player to that server once it's ready. I ended up putting the info on how it worked right next to the door because I didn't assume people would understand that's how it worked. Also with this process, it took about 20 to 30 seconds to start a new server. So the player that is looking for a new server had to look at the loading screen for a long time before joining. Also, the server would automatically shut down when the last player left, which meant if the player started a server and then decided to leave right away, we're starting and stopping servers like way too often. Ideally, I'd want the system to continuously check the active player count across all the servers, and before they fill up, start a new one, and if a server is empty for too long, we just shut it down. So I thought about learning how to do it myself, but I wasn't even sure where to start, and I didn't want to do any more server work at the time, so I just put it aside and finished the progress update and the character update before coming back to it. The thought of creating a system like this for myself was always in the back of my mind, so I did what most people do when they're curious about something nowadays, is ask a large language model about it. I expressed my interest in running my own servers for Nightmare Tag, explained the current setup, and also told it about my experience with running Minecraft servers for my friends. Large language models are really good at giving you the most average answer with the given context. So in this case, it listed out the most common routes for me to take. And the most interesting method to run multiple servers on a single computer is this app called Docker. In very general terms, Docker can create and run little computers within your computer, and you can write Python scripts that automate tasks for Docker. I ended up spending a good chunk of my summer learning how to set up game servers for Docker, and then write Python scripts that interact with Docker to automate this server management. And I feel like I can make a really good tutorial on it now because I've set up this basic but solid framework for this system. And I'm just going to show it off real quick. I can set the update frequency, min and max server count, game version, tick whether to automate the local servers or use Unity servers, because I also implemented the ability to control Unity servers directly without having to use the matchmaker service. I did this in case my local computer can't host any more servers, then we can start using Unity servers. And the max for that can be configured in the Unity Developer Hub, so that max can be whatever you're willing to pay for. And since creating this system, Unity servers have costed me $0 because I never go above the amount my local system can handle. There's still a handful of Unity services that I use and don't plan on removing. Like Relay is the service I use for hosted lobbies, Cloud Save is for saving player data, or Cloud Code is to manage all the important data, or Vivox is used for the voice chat. All of these services cost money after a certain threshold. So that kind of brings me to our next chapter. General admission is my main monetization strategy, and it will cost you $10. For the longest time, I thought Nightmare Tag was just going to be a $10 game, but the problem with that is player count. Nightmare Tag is way more fun with more people, and because VR is already a niche market, it's going to be harder to get lots of people to play or get your friends to play if they gotta pay right away. So General Admission is supposed to be the full version of the game, hence the name General Admission. It's gone through a lot of changes since the launch because there was no XP or progression at the beginning, so it would just unlock game modes and maps, and then the first set of perks were introduced, half of those required General Admission, then the new characters were released, and those characters require General Admission, and as I add more content to the game, I am updating these paywalls. Currently, the only active paywall is unlocking new characters. Map voting and game mode voting doesn't really work well if some players can't vote for certain maps or certain game modes, so I removed the paywall there, and the perk paywall for Antonio and the Entity was removed because the new characters were added. And I'm just going to say it now to warn everyone, I don't plan on making any more characters free. If I do make more characters, General Admission should feel like the demo, so only playing and progressing as the default characters should give you a good taste of the game. I'm also going to warn everyone now that I plan on adding a paywall for hosting games. That's because the single player / co-op mode that I'm working on is going to be host lobbies only, and that's because you'll be able to save and load your dream worlds that you're progressing in. And as I stated earlier, players hosting their own games uses a Unity service, which does cost me money, so at least with this paywall, everyone that does host a game has paid at some point. This still means though that if you've paid for the game, all your friends can still join you for free. General Admission is where I make most of my sales, but I don't think I'd be able to cover initial server costs if it wasn't for also adding skins to the game. And I was planning on adding customization last because I like to focus on the gameplay features first, but I was pushed to do this out of demand, and I think it's a good thing that I added it. It adds a lot of personality to the game, and the best part about it now is that we have skin contests in the Discord server. The community will create and vote on the next skins to be in the game, and it's always impressive and pretty funny to see what people create. I implemented a very basic structure for the skin system. You just buy tokens with real life money, and then you spend the tokens on skins in the game, and the skins have different levels of rarity to them, which dictate how much they cost. I try to make all my interactions as 3D as possible, so to make the purchase on the tokens, you press these buttons on the token machine, which opens the in-app purchase menu, and then once you have tokens, you go over to the skin selection area, you grab the skin you want to buy, which is like these little statues, you bring it to the middle, you place it on the pedestal in the middle, which brings the avatar to life, it like mirrors your movements and all that. I like this display better than a mirror because you get to view the skin from all directions before you purchase it. And to purchase it, you grab this star that's attached to the pedestal in the middle, and you hold trigger to buy it or equip the skin. Across from the store is your recently equipped skins, and you'll see another pedestal here which spawns in all your skins that you own. So if you don't see your skin that you purchased on the table here, you go to this pedestal, you grab the star, and you'll see all the options for all the skins that you own. And if you don't see your skin there, just reach out to me on Discord, I'll help you sort it out. With all the AppLab Launch bumps out of the way, I went back to working on the progress update. Something that keeps me coming back to a game is this sense of progression, so that was kind of the main focus for this update. I wanted to reward players for spending time in the game and then let them choose how they upgrade their character. And that's exactly what I added to Nightmare Tag. So I started with the first two characters, which are the human, Antonio, and the monster being the entity. Both these characters now have special abilities that can be upgraded, and this system is called Perks. Perks are abilities that are specific to each character, and to upgrade these perks you'll need experience points, which I'm going to call XP. XP is separated between human and monster. Human XP is gained by completing objectives and reviving teammates and can only be spent on human perks. Monster XP is gained by killing humans and can only be spent on monster perks. The plan is to have each character and their abilities revolve around a theme. Antonio's theme is teamwork, designed to encourage teamwork and reward players working together. The entity's theme is swiftness. Its abilities are designed to be as simple as possible, and its movement style is very fast. As much as I try to use gestures and motions as inputs, some monster abilities need a button press at some point. My favorite is still the entity eye pull interaction, because it involves a button and a gesture. Once you're familiar with it, I find it quick, intuitive, and immersive, which is everything I'm aiming for. Currently, the entity's Seeker mode and Zonelock abilities require a button to activate, and I feel like there's an opportunity here to have some sort of motion gesture to activate it, but having it just be buttons makes things a little simpler, so I'm fine with it for now. Now, human perks I'm trying to keep completely passive, like no button presses, because I already use the A and X buttons for recalling your tools, which is very important and shouldn't change based on your character. But the main reason I'm making human perks more passive is because I want to keep the big game-changing abilities in the form of attachments. This way, every game that you play and during the games that you play, you find abilities as you explore, and then you can swap out those abilities as the situation changes. And human perks being a little more passive just means it gives you a different level of advantage that isn't as game-changing, but you don't have to press any buttons to activate any of the abilities. Once you have enough XP to upgrade a perk, you have to go find the perk room, which is in the main lobby, and in the pre-game area, you gotta go find the arcade-looking room, and then there's these big signs that say either monster perks or human perks. You just go into those rooms, and there you'll find these objects. They're like these discs, and those are the actual perks. So you have to pick up those discs and put them in the pedestals to modify them or activate them or whatever. I'm gonna play a video that explains all of this. I made this because it's pretty complicated, so it's also included in the game, but I'm going to quickly say some things that aren't included in the video. I know in the previous devlog I said I was going to create a whole new environment for the character customization, but I quickly realized that it's not ideal for players to leave the lobby every time they want to customize their character. So I created these smaller rooms in the pre-game area, the main room, just so you can quickly access them in between games and upgrade your character. Also, despite the perks varying in their usefulness, every perk costs the same amount of XP to unlock all the upgrades and to reach the perk's max level. You'll see what I mean by this once I play the video, but it's 100,000 points to reach the max level of a perk, and 50,000 points to unlock all the upgrades on the perk. So this is across all the perks. They all cost the same. So it doesn't matter which one you start with, just pick one to start investing your time into. Okay, now time for the video because it just explains it best. So if you've seen this video before, just skip to the next chapter. And if you forget about this info or you just want to watch it later, you can find it in-game on the TV in the perk rooms. So here's the video.
Welcome to the perk room. Perks are abilities that can be upgraded and customized. In this room there are 4 interactive pedestals: the Perk Spawner, Perk Modifier, Perk Info Reader, and Active Perk pedestals. The Perk Spawner has access to all perks. Grab the star and select your desired perk to retrieve it from the void. Activate up to 3 perks by placing them on the Active Perk pedestals. Place a perk in the Perk Info Reader to learn more about the perk and its upgrade branches. The Perk Modifier is used to customize upgrades. Place a perk in the modifier to display all upgrades. Before customizing, you must upgrade the perk's power level. The number of enabled upgrades is determined by the power level. For example, power level 1 can only enable 1 upgrade, power level 6 can enable 6 upgrades. The max power level is determined by the number of upgrades, minus the number of branches. This limits upgrade combinations, making every possibility balanced, or strong on one branch with a weakness in another branch. Use the star attached to the pedestal to upgrade a perk's power level. To enable an upgrade, you first have to unlock it. After it is unlocked, you can freely enable and disable it.
Before I start actually talking about the perks, you'll notice that a lot of them share upgrade branch names. Some of them don't really need explaining, like a lot of them have cooldown, limit, frequency, duration, but some of the upgrade branches are reused in different ways, so you might need to go to the Perk Info Reader to read about the specific way it functions on that upgrade. But I figure I'll talk about exposure here because it's a crucial benefit to some of the perks, and it's kind of complicated and has a lot of little details to it. So if the perk has the ability to expose someone, there's a couple ways this is done, and it usually depends on if you're a monster or human. For humans, most of the time the base level will give you an audio cue in the direction of the exposed player, and this audio cue will update its direction if you or the other player moves around. The next level would be direction. It creates a stationary ripple of light that points in the direction of the exposed player. This ripple of light will also update its direction if the player it's tracking moves around. Position is the next level. It creates a cloud of light directly on top of the player that it's exposing, and it's visible through walls. And if the perk benefits from determining if it's a human or a monster, there'll be another level after this that just changes the color based on the player type. Monster perks that have exposure work a little differently. They almost always go up to level 4, level 1 being nothing, level 2 will just reveal invisible humans, level 3 will expose moving humans through walls, and level 4 will expose humans through walls regardless of invisibility. For as long as the entity eyes were in the game, they had that ability to expose players through walls, and to balance it, I had that see-through walls vision only worked when you're in Seeker mode. I found that I rarely saw humans through walls with this system because humans had to be making eye contact with the eye that I place while I'm in Seeker mode, and now that this exposure system is tiered for perks, I had a chance to kind of rework it. For context, some of these changes happened after I added the second round of Mimic perks because the Mimic needed an ability to expose humans, and it had to work a little differently than the entity eyes. And this kind of opened up the possibility to add the exposure upgrade branch to frozen entities, and also add a duration upgrade branch to the entity eyes. So this is how it works currently. Humans that are exposed by these abilities will be seen for a set duration, and if it's upgraded to expose through walls, then those players are exposed regardless if you're in Seeker mode or not. Also, this isn't new, but exposed humans are exposed to all monsters. These changes made all the perks that use exposure way more useful because as soon as someone makes eye contact, for example, they're exposed for that set duration that you've upgraded it to, and certain builds can make it just super hard for humans to hide. Can't Work Alone simply helps you find your teammates. If no one's nearby for a set period of time, then the perk will kick in and direct you to the closest human player. The idea is to help you reconnect with your team when you're all alone, or if you're in elimination and you like to do rescue missions, it's a great perk for that. It uses the exposure system to expose the teammates, and by default it only reveals direction, no audio cue, and the upgrades tweak things like how long it takes to activate, how often it activates, and how many teammates it can reveal. Power in numbers rewards you for sticking with your team. The more teammates you have nearby, the bigger bonus you get. Every second, the perk checks how many teammates are within the upgraded range, and for each human inside that range, you gain a stacking boost. The boost is upgradable as well, and it's separated between the base boost and boost for each additional human. For the flash gun, it recharges the beam, and for the scanner, it makes the ping frequency faster. It doesn't benefit any attachments, but it kind of makes sense, so I have that written down to implement at some point. Who Did This is meant to encourage players to fight back against the monsters. With this perk, destroying objects that the monster creates will reveal their position with the exposure system. And because the first round of perks have been in the game the longest, I've had a lot of time to think about how to update them, and I think Who Did This really needs a rework. I want this perk to have the ability to activate when blinding monsters too. Like instead of activating only when an object breaks, it can activate when you blind the monster or burn a monster object for a certain amount of time. Gift of Giving is intended to encourage players to share, which I know is really hard, but if you have this perk enabled, attachments can be recharged if you give them to other players. So instead of using it until it runs out, you can give it to someone else and maybe they'll help you back. Or you can try to convince another player to keep giving it back to you for infinite uses. You'll hear the sound cue when the attachment recharges. It doesn't recharge the attachment all the way, but you can upgrade it to do that. You can also configure how long the attachment waits for another player to pick it up after you've dropped it, and the cooldown only kicks in after someone picks it up within that time frame. Entity Eyes and Zonelocks were already in the game, but now they have various upgrade branches allowing you to customize how they function. Entity Eyes have a lot of upgrade branches, like Limit, which allows you to configure how many are active at a time, Exposure, like I talked about, and Duration works alongside that. Field of View and Range allow you to change the settings for detecting eye contact, and Cooldown stops eye spamming, which was fun while it lasted, but it was a much needed change. And Burn Time allows you to determine how long it takes a beam to destroy the eye. Zonelocks also have their own list of upgrade branches. They're all pretty self-explanatory and I'll let you explore them for yourself, but now you can configure things like size, duration, poison damage, and even how sealed it is. Again, all the perks can't be fully maxed out on all the branches, so you have to make decisions between which branches you prefer. Like, do you want more eyes or do you want less eyes with a higher field of view? Or smaller zone lock, or a zone lock with more poison damage. Frozen Entities is a new ability that's activated when entering Seeker mode. The entity will leave behind its body in the exact pose that it was standing in. Humans that run into the claws are poisoned and exposed. If used right, the entity can strategically block common escape paths. Common strategy I see is setting them up in front of the portals in the portal room. This will signal you when a human enters, and you can quickly teleport back for the kill. The exposure and poison combo is really lethal, so if you take the time to set this up in all the common pathways and just herd humans into there, it's just easy kills. Electric Disruption was added to counter some common strategies. If humans were heavy on the trigger and using their beams and all working together, you're supposed to go in and out of Seeker mode to be elusive and avoid getting hit. This perk just makes it easier to counter that sort of playstyle, giving the monster temporary moments to attack without having to worry about being blinded. But they have to position themselves right in the middle of the action. It activates in a radius around the entity when it exits Seeker mode. It's extremely useful at stopping the VHS tape from being played in VHS Run and ambushing elevators in Elimination. One of the hardest parts about developing this perk system is designing the user interface for it. I ended up creating this system that I call Star UI, and I reuse it in a lot of places throughout the game. There are 3 types of stars that you interact with, and you interact with them all the same. You grab them with the grip button, and you select with the trigger. The star system is used to display a list of options to configure. It's used in the perk modification and the game mode voting process. Each branch of stars lists the options for a specific setting. So for perks, that could be like the list of upgrade values for cooldown time, and for the game settings, that could list all the possible values for the map size. Part of my goal with Star UI is to remove any of the unnecessary text on screen when it's not needed. So I only have the branch's titles appear when you stand in front of it, and the options for all the stars only appear when you hover your hand over it. Then when you select the option, the branch in the middle will connect up to the star that you selected. You can also spin the star system around and scale it by grabbing any of the stars. It's a fun way to interact with it and saves you from actually moving around the star system. Real stars are designed to display a single list of options, unlike the star system, which is used to display multiple lists. When you grab this star, all the options will be displayed in a circle. Then you hover over your desired selection, and your selection is displayed in the middle along with any description, and then like always, you press the trigger to select. This system is very flexible, so you'll see it a lot. I use it for all the spawning pedestals, skin selector, perk info reader, server menu, and more. I really like what I ended up with here because of how compact it is. When you're not using it, it's just a little dot on your screen. I also like how customizable it is, like I can set the title, description, the time it takes to select something, the select event. It can all be set in runtime, so as things are updating, those lists are changing. You can also configure how many options are displayed per page, and the player navigates the pages with the arrows on the side. So yeah, it's just super compact, easy to use, quick to understand, and just super flexible. The key star is like a variant of the wheel star, and it's meant to be like your in-game keyboard. It has 3 rings to it. The inner ring is all the numbers, the outer ring is all the letters, and then if you pull all the way out, that's your backspace. Right now it's only used for inputting the join code, and I have thought about laying it out like a normal keyboard or at least having the option for that, but I think it's fine for now. The main menu environment had to be expanded to fit a handful of new things. There's 3 main areas. The Nightmare Tag area is where you join and create game instances. The arcade themed area named Customize is where you buy and select skins, select your character, upgrade and customize perks. And the school themed area named Tutorials is where you find all the tutorials and info about the game. Before the main menu revamp, everything was just on a 2D menu in front of you. And if you're designing a game for VR, it makes things simpler to do it this way, but it's just not that engaging or immersive. So I took the time to turn all these 2D buttons and make them 3D actions. So instead of using a laser pointer to select join game, you now have to walk through the doorway of the lobby that you want to join. Servers are displayed on the left here and hosts are on the right. Underneath each list is a wheel star for you to refresh and navigate through the pages if they ever fill up. There's also separate doorways to create the public or private host lobbies, and a special doorway with a key star for you to input the join codes. The same doorway system is used for entering all the tutorials. I spent a good deal of time revamping all these tutorials because I don't want players to join their first game and be completely clueless. To join a multiplayer game, you first gotta complete the human tutorial, the ghost tutorial, and the monster tutorial. They don't tell you everything you need to know about the game, but it does make sure that you know the basics before you join your first game. Also in the tutorial area, there's an interactive room to learn about the Star UI systems, and on the other end of that, there's an entrance labeled Creatures and Attachments, and this isn't mandatory, but you just go here if you want to explore all the zones, test out the attachments, and play with the monkeys and the fish. There's also a TV in the tutorial area, and it has all the VHS tapes for the game mode tutorials underneath it, so you can watch how to play the game modes there. This TV is also in the pre-game area and automatically updates with the current game mode tutorial. I tried to spawn these game mode VHS tapes in your scanner when the game started so that you had a chance to learn how to play the game mode while it started, but I just found that nobody actually played the tape when it spawned in their scanner, and it was just kind of annoying to always start with a tutorial in your scanner. I also tried locking all the servers to a specific game mode. That way, if you joined a game and you didn't know how to play the game mode, it would force you to watch the tutorial before you even join the server. But now that game mode voting's a thing, you could join that server and then they'll switch the game mode on you and then you just haven't watched that tutorial yet. I still kept the feature where if you join a server or a host that's playing a game mode that you've never played before, it's going to force you to watch the tutorial before you join. But now that the game mode could just switch up on you, hopefully just eventually you keep joining servers of different game modes and you just have watched all the tutorials at some point. I am constantly reworking tutorials and the process of just onboarding players. I think about updating this all the time, so feedback is greatly appreciated here. I just find that most players try to figure it out as they play, which is totally fair. That's how I want to play too. Or they just want other players to tell them how to play. Which is also a good thing for this game because there's a lot of strategies that just aren't explained in the tutorials. Humans can now climb and vault over anything they can dream of. With an empty hand, you face your palm towards any wall, ledge, or floor, and then you hold the trigger to grip that surface and move yourself around. If you grab any steep surfaces or like a vertical wall, each hand only has 2 seconds of stamina, and stamina is recharged when your feet touch the ground or when you grab a surface that's parallel to the floor. You'll know you're running out of stamina in that last second because your avatar will actually start to slip a little bit and you'll get some haptic feedback on the hand that you're grabbing the wall with. Also, your player collider's tucked up when you're climbing so that you can easily get up and over ledges. There isn't too much to say here, but if you have played the game before, you know how useful this feature is. It isn't the fastest way to move around, but it opens up many new pathways and hiding spots for the humans. For a good while, all the avatars were 1.7 meters tall, and the animation system would just make the avatar crouch or stand on their toes to reach your height. I could update this in 2 ways. I could scale the player to match the avatars, or I could scale the avatars to match the player. I kind of like the first idea of making the characters a specific height, so like if anyone's playing the entity, they'll be 2 meters tall, and if you're playing Antonio, you'll be 1.5 meters tall. But as I was playing around with this, I ran into a real weird problem, and if you're watching this, let me know if there's a solution to this. If you scale the player, the whole world shrinks or grows from their perspective. Like if you scale the player up to match the avatar, their whole world shrinks around them, including the hands of the avatar. And something that's important for immersion for me is having your virtual hands roughly match the size of the controller. Like the grips of the flash gun and the scanner are designed around the shape of the controller for the sole reason of feeling more natural to hold. To fix this, the only solution I could think of is to scale the hands accordingly. Like if you scale the player up, their hands are going to appear smaller, so you need to scale the hands up to match the IRL controller size. But now that I've changed the scale of the hands, all the objects that are designed to fit in the hands nicely don't fit nicely anymore. So do I change the scale of the objects? But everyone's hands are going to be different sizes, so do I only scale the objects when a player picks it up? That doesn't seem very immersive at all, so this solution just doesn't seem like the way to go. And ideally, if I did go this way where everyone's hands are different sizes, I would need a system where the fingers wrap around the objects in a very dynamic way, and that's just not really the type of system I want to be focusing on. So I decided to go the other way, which I think ended up being more natural and immersive anyway. Players being their own height in social VR games just feels more human. There are pros and cons to being tall and being short, but I don't believe there's any big game-changing difference in Nightmare Tag. I've been told to tighten the clamp on the min and max height, but it is sort of fun to see someone be really small or really tall in your dreams. And again, I don't find it that frustrating if someone's really small, their hitbox is still clamped to the same height as crouching. Plus, I made it a little difficult to update your height. It will automatically adjust upwards, but not downwards. So the game is periodically checking your height, and if it's above your set height for a few seconds, it's going to update to that new height. And to reset your height, if it goes too far above, you need to go back to the main menu and select Reset Height from the Player Settings menu. I did this so players don't change their height too often. I'm guessing most players don't even know how to reset their height. The automatic system just seems to be working alright. Another big avatar change is bringing back the ability to see your own body, and there's a few reasons for this. One is that I relit the environment, which means that humans can't rely on their headlamps anymore to determine if they're invisible. I liked when this was a feature before because it didn't use any heads-up display, which I'm trying to avoid, and it just makes sense to look at your body to see if you're invisible. The problem with it at the time is that the avatar's hands and body weren't directly connected, so it just ended up looking really bad. But now that I took the time to smoothly connect these two objects and separate them by material, I can just swap out the body's material with an invisible one when the local player is invisible. This is also the main reason why hands don't change based on the skin that you choose. They're just separate materials, it's just the way it's set up, but I could change this in the future. Another really nice feature I added to the avatar system while reworking it is hand gestures. It was a really nice feature to add that gives another level of social presence. Because before it was just open hand and fist, now you get all the basic VR hand gestures like point, thumbs up, finger gun, and even this little climbing pose. I feel like I don't need to talk about the hand gestures too much, but I do want to mention how finicky all this was to set up. For context, I use Final IK to animate the body, which requires a humanoid avatar. But for some reason, when you set your avatar as humanoid, it slightly changes some of the rotations and positions of your animations. I'm guessing this happens because it automatically adjusts your model to fit their system. As I said a little earlier, hands are a very important part for VR immersion for me, and having weird hand poses could break that immersion. Now, my animation files in Blender looked perfect, but when I brought it over to Unity and set the avatar to humanoid, some of the hand poses would twist the thumb into the hand just a little too much, and I spent literal days trying to figure out why Unity was doing this and how I could fix it. I tried so many things, I just eventually gave up on it, so that's the reason why some of the poses, the fingers are just like twisted into the hand just a little bit too much. Lastly, a little small change here to the avatars is that when you die, instead of having the same skin for all the ghosts, you now keep your skin that you have equipped, it just turns blue and transparent when you die. With a proper perk system in place, I moved on to setting up the character system. This led me down the path of reworking the entire way players were structured. I still don't think it's perfect, but it's pretty close to perfect now because of how flexible it is. It manages everything surrounding the player. It determines which movement system to use, which avatar to use, which abilities and components are enabled, and it has to do all this across the network too. And if I'm planning to have a lot of characters, I want a flexible system that will load stuff in only when needed, instead of the previous system, which had all the components loaded on the player and then just listened to a true or false value that determined if you were monster or human. So I really took the time to make this dream system, and I'm pretty happy with what I ended up with. A lot of Nightmare Tag is building flexible frameworks like this, and I love it. The progress update was all about building a flexible save system, and the character update is about building a flexible player management system. Taking my time with these systems really allows me to move forward faster, because creating a new character is super easy because all the framework's there. And it goes beyond Nightmare Tag because I learned so much from building these really big systems, and I'll likely remix them in future games that I make. But I still have some really big systems that I want to build, like the next update is all about environment management on a large scale. Because right now, all the zones are put in place at the beginning of the round and they never move. This is because the objects and the creatures are also loaded in. And if we unload any of the zones when a player's not in them, we also need to do the same for the objects and the creatures. So I've been thinking about making a system that works on a much bigger scale that saves all the data of all the objects and the creatures that's in the zone when it unloads. But that's not what this devlog's about, so let's talk about characters. I could have simply used a wheel star for character selection, but that wasn't cool enough for me. Instead, you have to enter the doorway, either labeled monster selection or human selection. Then you'll enter this void with the characters to select in front of you. If you're looking at a character, it will slide towards you and start mirroring your movements. To select it, you reach forward and it will phase into you and you will become that character. If you need to unlock the character, a ghost material is applied to the character. When you look at it, it won't slide all the way towards you, but a pedestal will appear in front of you with a star on it. You grab that star to see the price, to unlock it, and you select the star to unlock the character. I kind of wish there was a cooler way to unlock the characters that didn't involve the pedestal, but it's kind of hard to think of a way to display how much it costs and then have an interactive and intuitive way to select unlock. I'd also really like to give the players the perk discs with the perk info reader so that they can read about all the perks and their upgrade branches before they choose to unlock the character. So I might revisit all this later, but I'm happy with it for now. The idea of adding a new playable monster has always excited me, and the most exciting idea for a new monster is the idea that this monster can shapeshift into another player. I think the avatar updates at the end of the progress update was the segue into the character update because I really had to clean up the avatars to make it flexible for the Mimic. I was working on a voice recording system for the Mimic so that its seeker mode would revolve around sound instead of electricity. With this plan, the Mimic would see people talking through walls, record their voice, and then try to approach other players, playing the lines back trying to hide their identity. But as I was trying to figure out how to make this voice recording system, I was thinking about the current pacing of the game, and how I intentionally designed the game so that monsters can quickly track and kill humans, because the monsters should never be wandering around aimlessly, just hoping to find someone. The current pacing of the game is action-packed if everyone knows how to play. The feeling of being chased is almost constant. As a human, you have to find that right balance of moving around, staying still, and helping teammates stay alive, and monsters just have to focus on tracking people and killing them. So I didn't want to rebalance the pacing for a specific monster. I ended up designing the Mimic around the gameplay that we'd been playtesting for so long. I ended up ditching the idea to record voices because an ability like that would just slow down the track to kill process, and the Mimic would struggle to get kills if the entities are just outpacing them. So to keep up with the entity, here's the base ability that I ended up with. The Mimic can switch into any human at any time, and its Seeker mode is when it's mimicking a human. In this state, the legs and the eyeball of the Mimic retract into the mouth of the human it lives inside, completely hiding itself. And its Seeker mode is a little more complex than the entity because it has 2 levels to it. The first level is when the Mimic is mimicking itself. It looks like a blank Antonio. This is like its true Seeker mode. Its vision turns purple, you're unable to see humans, you're immune to blindness, you can go invisible when standing still, and you move super fast. But if you select another player to mimic, your vision switches to normal color vision like a human, but you can only see humans that aren't invisible, you're not immune to blindness anymore, and you're slightly slower than a real human. In both these levels of Seeker mode, you use the left stick and swing your arms to move like a normal human, which helps you blend in. And just like the entity, you can't hurt humans when you're in the Mimic Seeker mode. But unlike the entity, you're unable to see electricity through walls. Instead, what you can see through walls is some sounds. This makes it a little more complicated than the entity because the sounds have a specific effect for what they are. This gives you a little bit of context as to what you're chasing around. Instead of just following around electricity that's moving, you kind of know what you're attacking and what you're about to jump into. To kill humans, you have to exit Seeker mode by moving like a Mimic, which is by pressing the trigger button to launch out your grapple claws. The Mimic has these long legs that shoot out of the hands of the human body, which now have a max range of 10 meters, and their damage drops off over range, but their poison damage increases over range. Within 1 meter, they roughly do the same damage as the entity, which kind of enforces that 2-hand touch feel, but at distance they do a lot more poison damage than real damage, so this slows down your prey until they're within lethal distance. The damage for the Mimic has been modified a lot over the development cycle. The best feedback I got that influenced the end result is why have a ranged attack on a character that is meant to trick people into thinking they're human. In early playtests, most people only mimicked other people for fun, but if you're simply going for kills and XP, it's faster to kill people without mimicking them. Also, for a long time there was no transition time for switching in and out of Seeker mode, which was bad for balancing, but it helped the Mimic keep up with the entity. So the long grapple claw is how you damage humans, but it also helps you move in one direction towards where your claw landed. It's not really quick at changing directions because you have to wait for your claw to retract before you shoot again, and it keeps track of your momentum. Although the grapple claw will pull you really quickly, it's not as precise or reactive as the entity's movement. So I brought the grip button movement from the entity over to the Mimic, but made it slower and made it 3D. Instead of the entity having horizontal and vertical movement separated by different buttons, holding the grip button and moving your arm will move the Mimic in full 3D. And when the Mimic's in attack mode, its legs are out, allowing the Mimic to cling and move along walls and ceilings. So the Mimic can't just fly around, its legs have to be touching a surface, kinda like a spider. So the Mimic kinda has 3 movement mechanics, the human movement for Seeker mode, and then the grapple and 3D movement for attack mode. It doesn't feel as quick and controllable as the entity, but the grapple and spider-like movement along walls is pretty fun to use. But being able to switch in and out of attack mode instantly was still a problem. I was just afraid that adding that delay time would make the Mimic unplayably slow. Plus there might be a way to balance that without messing with the movement timing. But as I was reworking the player vision manager to better handle fading effects, like fading in and out of Seeker mode, I thought I should try it. This change forces the Mimic to stand still for a second as they transform, which is the same time it takes the entity to transform in and out of Seeker mode. So, to switch to human movement as a Mimic, you can only be pressing the left stick. Pressing the trigger will cancel the transition, and vice versa. If you want to switch to Mimic movement, you have to be pressing a trigger without pushing on the left stick. The grips don't transform the Mimic because that button's required for a gesture that activates a perk I'll talk about later. Speaking of abilities, the main ability for the Mimic is shape-shifting into other players. To do this, you hold the A button, which creates a wheel star with all the humans on it. The colors of the icon specifies their character, and hovering over the icon will display the player's name in the middle. Then you release the button to confirm your selection. To mimic yourself, you hover over the center and release the button. This also works by just quickly pressing A. The best part about the shape-shifting ability is something I didn't even think about when I was creating it. If the lobby's full of mimics that are mimicking you, you can actually run around confidently and blend in with them. But they'll catch on eventually, I think. It's just a new feeling that fits so perfectly in this game. Now with all this said about the Mimic, it's definitely harder to learn and play as this monster, which is the main reason I'm making characters unlockable with XP. This way players start with the default characters, making the game easier to understand at first, and then when they want to expand on their playstyle, they can unlock the characters that they like. When the new characters first got released, I got the most feedback for the Mimic, most of them saying that the Mimic was overpowered, which I disagree with even before the changes that I've made. The entity has always been faster at tracking and killing, and as I've stated before, the hardest part about designing the Mimic is finding that right balance of abilities that make mimicking another player rewarding and fast enough to keep up with the entity. So despite me thinking that the Mimic was harder to use than the entity, I tried my best to make some balancing changes that didn't affect the speed of the Mimic. One of those changes is the transition time that I talked about already, but it took me 4 months to decide to add, and 2 is the damage drop-off. I kept changing the damage values to find that sweet spot where the Mimic would want to get close before applying damage. Originally it was a linear drop-off between 60 and 20, now it's an exponential fall-off, so it starts off really strong and dips really quickly. And Poison is the opposite, it quadrilaterally increases. Here's a graph of the current damage, distance on the x-axis, damage on the y-axis. Voice Vision was the first perk added to the Mimic, and it's intended to be its main tracking ability. Activated by making a shush gesture, the Mimic can see human voices through walls for a short time. Humans can counter this by doing the same shush gesture to silence their voices, and the invisibility bubble will automatically silence humans inside of it. You can tell when you're silenced when the atmosphere sound effect volume dips very low. Because the Mimic's Seeker mode can see sound through walls, I originally had it so that the Mimic could see human voices through walls at all times. So I turned it into an ability with a duration and a sound cue so that players knew when it was coming and it was only going to be temporary. Also adding the ability for humans to make the shush gesture to hide their voice made it quick and easy for humans to hide from the Mimic without having to open their settings menu and press mute, and it still allowed them to communicate with each other. If you have Kindred Sense enabled, the Mimic periodically senses the direction of the human it's imitating. Entity Eyes were added to get the direction of the closest player, and again this is because the monster should never be wandering around aimlessly. The Mimic needs a similar ability if the humans are really good at countering voice vision. It is kind of counterintuitive to track and approach the player that you're imitating, but if that player's in a group, it's fun to scatter and confuse that group. And if they're alone, it's just scary to be chased by yourself, or you can quickly change your disguise to someone else. Prop Conjure gives the Mimic the ability to summon in fake tools to reinforce its disguise. To summon in these props, you hold the secondary buttons on either hand. Left hand will summon in the scanner, right hand will summon in the flash gun. They're only active for a set duration, and you can hold either button again to put them away. There's only a few ways to tell if someone's a Mimic. Not being able to pick up and interact with objects is one of them, so hopefully this perk helps you pull off that illusion. These fake tools don't work, so you have to hope that the humans don't ask you to use them. I think as more people start to fully understand the Mimic, this ability will become obsolete. It'll barely be useful, and players will likely swap it out for a different perk. And if I do update it, I think I'll make it more like a trap ability, because the Mimic doesn't have something like that right now. No promises on this idea, but I'm thinking that the Mimic could spawn in fake attachments to try to give to other players or just leave on the ground. And if someone does pick it up, then that player is exposed and poisoned. I stopped at 3 perks for each character when they first launched, rather than 4 like Antonio and the Entity. I did this intentionally because I wanted to see how the characters did in the production environment before adding anything new. One of the biggest advantages the Entity has over the Mimic is the Electric Disruption perk. Being able to temporarily disable tools is a huge advantage, so I felt like I needed to add a similar ability to the Mimic. But instead of making it the exact same as the Entity, where the disruption happens in a sphere around the monster and it being triggered when exiting Seeker mode, the Mimic's version of this ability happens in a cylinder around the grapple claw, and it's activated when you hold the grip when your grapple claw is extended. Here's a quick demonstration. It's a lot harder to hit because it isn't in a big radius around the player, it's a smaller radius around your claws, which means it can potentially reach further, but it's harder to pull off. Toxic Whisper is another reason to get close to humans before trying to kill them. During playtests, we had a version of the Mimic that could only damage humans by talking to them. It was a really fun mechanic, but it was easily abused and sorta unreliable, so I decided to keep it in a way that worked. So now it doesn't do damage, it only poisons and exposes humans, and it only works when you're in seeker mode or mimicking another player. It can be used as a way of finding people because the mimic can walk around saying hello, and if it gets too close to someone hiding invisible, it's going to expose them. Also, something to note for the upgrades on this perk is that there's 2 upgrade branches for range. I separated them into activation range and effective range. Activation range is the maximum distance a human can be for this perk to activate when you talk, and the effective range is that when this perk activates, all the humans within that range are affected by the perk. And I separated them because I want to give players a way to control these values, but I think typically most players are going to go for a small activation range and a large effective range. There's a lot of easy human character ideas I could do, like a tank, a medic, an athlete, but I chose to go with something a little more lore related, plus I was planning on having a flash gun attachment and a scanner attachment linked to each character. The advanced scanner and the advanced beam would be Antonio's attachments, and the portal gun and the portal tape would be Charlie's attachments. In the world of the game, Charles researches how the dreamscape is connected. He utilizes portals and teleportation to evade monsters while he's doing his research. Most of his perks are activated when he or someone else goes through a portal. This includes all the portal doors and all the portal attachments, so finding a portal gun or a portal tape is even more useful if you like to play as Charles. All these perks are going to be pretty easy to explain, and I'm going to let you explore the upgrade branches for yourself. So I'm going to run through these perks pretty quickly now. Portal Eggs gives you a short speed boost after traveling through a portal. That's it. Portal Cloak makes you invisible for a short time after you travel through a portal. A unique thing about this perk is that it can be upgraded to protect you from certain abilities that could expose you after you teleport. Like the entity could place an eye right outside of a portal door, that way any human that teleports through is instantly exposed. So now you can upgrade this perk to protect yourself from that. Warp Watcher gives you the ability to sense everyone that teleports through a portal. It uses the exposure system, so you can upgrade it to expose players however you like. There's no cooldown on this perk, so every time someone teleports through a portal, you'll be aware of it. Mind Over Body gives Charles the ability to teleport to his head's location when he's revived. This perk felt needed because all the other perks were only activated when going through portals. This one involves teleportation in a new and useful way. Despite it being called the character update, I decided to add some new attachments. Drop Bomb is a new VHS tape that's supposed to be used like a trap. It detonates a big ball of light around itself, blinding nearby monsters and also harming humans. You play the tape, toss it on the ground, and you wait for a monster to approach. The drop bomb only activates if it's not being held and a monster's within range. It damages humans to prevent them from spamming it. Since they're able to recall their scanner, they can play the tape, throw it, detonate, recall it, play it again, throw, and just keep repeating until it runs out. Before uses runs out really quickly, and humans will be close to death by the end. Advanced Beam is a new flash gun attachment that shoots a beam that can go through walls and stays in place, which is used for blocking pathways. Any monster that touches the beam is completely stunned. It also instantly burns everything that it touches, meaning it can revive people, keep burn marks alive, max out a fish's movement speed, instantly break monster stuff, stun monkeys. Anything that can be burned will quickly be burned by the advanced beam, making it widely useful. It has a charge up time, which makes it sort of slow to use, but you can run around with it charged up. It just makes a lot of noise and it generates electricity, which draws a lot of attention to you. But the longer you charge it up, the longer the beam stays active and the further it shoots. Every day, the Dreamscape's going to randomly generate 9 4-digit codes, one for each zone. When you play the game, you'll passively run into these codes. You have to remember them, and when the game ends, you have to input them into the Forgotten Fortune terminal in the pregame area to receive rewards. This includes tokens and XP. This feature was definitely not needed in the character update, but I like it for a lot of reasons, and daily rewards is commonly suggested. I've always wanted a way for people to earn bonus points for exploring and playing more, and this encourages players to play and vote for a variety of zones every time they play. And it makes your memory better. I find it funny when people come back to the pregame area and they forget their code. I was never completely happy with the menu for the map and game settings. The way they worked only allowed one player to change and save the settings at a time, and this was fine for playtesting, but it was being abused in the production environment. Players would race to the settings and camp it to prevent other people from changing it. I knew I had to build a voting system eventually, so I started with the map. So here's how it works. I separated it from the game settings and gave it its own area. Here you'll see a big display that shows all the current votes, along with some pedestals. You go to the pedestal right under the display board to spawn in the zone that you wish to vote for. A ball with a 360 photo will emerge from that pedestal, and you have to pick it up and place it on one of the pedestals behind you to lock in your vote. Implementing map voting in this way ended up removing the ability to position the zones in the arrangement that you wished, but I found that no one really cared. The zone that you wanted to play in randomly placed in the arrangement was good enough. But I can easily see a way to add an arrangement of pedestals in a grid that represents and determines the map layout. Game voting was always in my roadmap, and for the same reasons as map voting, it doesn't make sense that only one person can change the settings at a time. It makes more sense that everyone can vote for it. I used a star system for this UI because it's perfect to display and interact with a list of settings. The server averages all the votes and displays it on the board behind the star system. By default, all the votes are cast with default values. I did this because if you forget to vote and one person voted for crazy settings, you're not stuck with it. At least it's going to be averaged against all the default settings. But if everyone in the lobby agrees to drastically change these settings, everyone has to vote for it. Implementing game mode voting also means I need to change the process in which the game starts. The elevator doors won't open until at least 2 players have voted for a game mode. And to do this, you need to go to the spawner pedestal that's under the display board, use the wheel start to select the game mode that you want to vote for, pick up the object and put it on the pedestal behind you. This is exactly like the map voting process. But once 2 votes are cast, a countdown will start and end. The pedestal that you put the game mode object on will have a star system on it with all the game mode settings that you can vote for. The elevator doors will also open and wait for you to press the down button to start the game. Expand map is a new game setting that I quickly want to talk about here because it isn't explained in game. Currently this setting is only available in VHS run and only really works when your dead state is set to monster. This setting determines the max size the map can expand to, and the map expands as more people die and become monsters. I really enjoy this in VHS run because it makes the game more fair as it comes down to last man standing. It gives that last person more room to escape and hide. In the character update, I completely overhauled the quick burn system. My goal with these changes is to give humans that are alone one solid chance to escape. Because a 1v1 against a monster should usually be a losing battle, I want to still give you that feeling like there's always a bit of hope. The flashgun's beam is designed to be the common way to fight back against the monster. So it makes sense that it would give you that opportunity to escape, but also let the monster recover before you can hit it hard again. For context, the old quick burn system was directly tied to your flashgun's battery percentage. The idea was that if you kept your beam fully charged, you'd do more damage to the monster, which makes sense, but in practice it gave humans too many chances to apply quick burn damage. Because each time your beam hit a monster, it would check your battery level and tell the monster, hey, my battery was at this percent when I first hit you, so you need to burn up to that percent if you're not already there. And this works if your hands are shaky or you miss for a second, because your battery would drop below and then quick burn damage wouldn't be applied. And since this was based around the flashgun, it didn't matter how much the monster was getting burned, meaning if the monster was constantly getting burned by different people, quick burn damage was being applied every single time. So now I've updated it so the quick burn system works around the monster, not the flashgun. I did this so that monsters don't feel like they're constantly being quick blinded. With this new setup, they have to fully recover before they're hit hard again. And this also helps humans fight back against bigger groups of monsters because they can blind them all the same regardless of the battery percentage. So this is currently how it works. A monster can only be burned when it's at 0% burned, and when you first hit a monster in this state, it will quickly be burned up to 30% and a 3-second bonus damage window is activated. At the beginning of this 3-second window, the damage is boosted by 400%, but it gradually falls to 0 as the timer runs out, so this first 3 seconds is crucial. After that, you'll need to keep applying damage or run away and wait for the monster to fully recover. Quick Tag was originally designed for new players. It's the simplest version of the game. But as tutorials got better, game voting was introduced, general admission removed the paywall in game modes, and the addition of Charles all led to the decision to update QuickTag. Monkeys are always more fun to have, but it adds another level of confusion for new players because monkeys bring attachments, and attachments are new abilities to learn. So I added monkeys and attachments to QuickTag because it makes it more fun and there isn't a reason not to anymore. Now that game mode voting's a thing, your first game could be any of the game modes that already include these features. I also added the map size setting to QuickTag, but only up to 4. 9 just felt too big during playtests. Also, I was automatically moving the monster from the portal room into the zone to help players that didn't understand the portal room. But now that I'm leaning away from making this game mode overly simple, I decided to activate the portal doors. Another reason I added attachments and portals to this game mode is to make Charlie not useless in this game mode. If there's no attachments or no portals or no chance to get revived, Charlie's perks will never be activated. So I still gotta update Capture the Fruit. The win pit's gone. All the games now finish in the ending hallway where winners become monsters and losers become humans. There was always some major problems with the win pit, and for as long as it was in the game, I never found the right solutions for it. The problem that kind of drove me to remove it completely was adding the Mimic. The Mimic could cling onto walls, and that kind of ruined this game mode. There's a couple things I could have done to fix this, but it just never felt right, and I didn't want to keep playing something that felt incomplete without a proper plan to fix it. I've slightly changed the way the endgame's played, and I thought I'd mention it here. The first thing you'll notice is that the up and down buttons were completely removed from these elevators, which used to be the way you ended this minigame. With this old setup, the first person just had to reach the elevator and press this button to end the game. So now that the buttons are removed, I changed the way the game determines the end state. Now the game waits for all the humans to die, or all the alive humans to reach an elevator. And I've always rewarded humans for escaping with more players, but people always just press the end game button instantly. So now that the players can only open and close the doors, they have the choice to wait for more people to enter, or they could close the doors on all their teammates and listen to them scream for help. I think this is a great change. Alright, that covers almost everything I worked on in the last year or so. I didn't mention any of the small changes because there's just so many of them. And if you haven't played since the last devlog, I encourage you to try the game again because it's going to look and feel completely different. And I'm still not done. I'm already working on the next big update. I've been dreaming about making a single player and co-op experience for a while now. I don't want to talk about it too much because I know playtesting it's going to change the end result anyway. What I can tell you is that it's going to be bigger. I'm currently reworking the zone management system to handle more configurations and optimize it so that it only loads in the zones that people are playing in. Currently, all the zones are locked into place at the beginning of a PvP game. This limits us to a max map size of 9 because there's only 9 zones and they can't be repeated. So actually right now, I have a working version of the zone manager that can handle an unlimited map size because this new system allows zones to be unloaded and repeated, as long as the same zone isn't directly next to itself. This allows me to think of game modes where the map can infinitely expand, so I'm trying to design a game mode that makes you feel like you're exploring deeper and deeper into the nightmare. And bigger maps like this work better for a single player or co-op experience because I can make the time between monster encounters longer, building up more suspension. This is hard to do in PvP because I don't want the monsters getting bored because it takes too long to find someone to kill. So after I finish working on the zone manager, I can start working on non-playable monsters. And when the first round of those non-playable monsters are complete, I can start to refine the game mode for this experience. After that, this update should be complete, and I have no idea when that will be done. But as always, if you want to try out these new features first and give me feedback, you can join the playtest release channel in the Nightmare Tag Discord. So that concludes Devlog 3. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments here, or the best place to reach me is on Discord. So with that, I'll see you in the next one.